With the world situation becoming increasingly complex, the 16th BRICS Summit was held in Kazan, Russia from October 22nd. Also, over 20 other countries, most of which are from the Global South and have joined initiatives like the Belt and Road, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or China-Africa Cooperation Forum. Many of these countries are in conflict regions around the world. A major reason for the interest in the gathering is the gathering of 3 of the 4 leaders of the axis of evil, with only Kim Jong-un absent. Much speculation surrounds the renewed meeting between Xi Jinping and Putin, with people questioning what strategies these 2 leaders might be discussing. Although Russia is technically the chair of this year's BRICS Summit, it appears that China is taking the lead. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent strong sanctions from the West, Putin has had to rely on Chinese support. At this summit, Xi Jinping seems to be the one in charge. News coverage has reflected this dynamic. When Putin met with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, they embraced warmly and shared laughter. In contrast, upon Xi Jinping's arrival in Kazan, Russian fighter jets escorted his plane, and after landing, he was greeted warmly by young Russian women and high-ranking officials. Later that evening, Xi and Putin met, exchanging only smiles and handshakes for the cameras. Observers noted that Putin seemed reserved when greeting Xi and did not respond when Xi called him an old friend. Back in May, during Putin's state visit to China, Xi had opened his arms for a warm embrace as Putin departed, a gesture that lingered for a few seconds. Speaking at the summit, Xi said, "The world is undergoing unprecedented changes. International circumstances are complicated, but I believe that the deep friendship between China and Russia will remain unchanged, and our shared responsibility as major nations will not waver." Commentators have observed Putin's cautious demeanor, reinforcing suspicions that China and Russia's relationship may not be as close as Chinese media has suggested. Each leader seems to have their own hidden agenda. This Kazan summit is the largest international event Russia has hosted since its invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Putin hopes to create an alliance to challenge Western hegemony, showcasing Russia's many allies. The Kremlin has claimed the BRICS summit as a diplomatic victory, showing that efforts by the West to isolate Moscow have failed. In June 2009, Brazil, Russia, India, and China announced the formation of the BRIC group, later adding South Africa to make it BRICS. 16 years later, in October 2024, BRICS expanded again, this time welcoming Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates, marking the first BRICS 9 summit. Interestingly, the concept of BRIC originated with Jim O'Neill, the chief economist at Goldman Sachs, with the idea that these 4 countries could lead emerging industries and potentially join the world's major economies, including the US and Japan. The concept quickly gained popularity worldwide. However, contrary to O'Neill's vision, China and Russia have used BRICS as a starting point to strengthen political alliances with countries that have poor human rights records. They have ambitiously pursued a path to global dominance, fostering an anti-Western image and pressuring the US and Europe politically. Reportedly, around 30 countries, including Azerbaijan, Algeria, and Syria, are also interested in joining BRICS. Even NATO member Turkey has expressed intentions to apply. This massive expansion has certainly caught the attention of Western countries. Beyond the political implications, the economic scale of BRICS is also striking. With nearly half of the world's population, 1/5 of global trade, and an economy that accounts for 35% of the world's GDP by purchasing power parity, the expanded BRICS now holds significant economic power. Public opinion generally holds that Xi Jinping intends to use the BRICS group to weaken the United States' influence and bolster its own position as a leader of the so-called Global South. Reports indicate that China accounts for over 60% of the BRICS countries' total economic output, which gives Beijing the leverage to promise more investments and loans to other member nations. In Beijing's view of the world, democratic political systems are not inherently superior to others, and economic rights can take precedence over human rights. Beijing particularly wants to show that the majority of the world's population sees the need to end a U.S.-centered global order. China aims to challenge the dominance of the U.S. dollar, America's military alliances, and human rights ideals like political and speech freedoms. Director of the China program at the Stimson Center in Washington, Yun Sun, noted that China is eager to shape BRICS as an alliance of the global South against the U.S.-led West. However, the larger the alliance, the harder it is to coordinate policies and maintain unity. The New York Times remarked that while China can count on support from isolated anti-Western members like Russia and Iran, it will struggle to convince democratic BRICS countries such as India, Brazil, and South Africa to adopt a more adversarial stance against the U.S. Putin, meanwhile, intends for this BRICS 9 summit to demonstrate that the West's economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation efforts have failed. Following the invasion of Ukraine, the West imposed comprehensive economic sanctions on Russia, cutting it off from the global banking system and isolating it diplomatically. For instance, an arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court prevented Putin from attending last year's BRICS summit in South Africa, forcing him to speak online instead. This summit is seen as a diplomatic victory for Putin. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres also attended the summit in Kazan, despite Ukraine's objections. He met with Putin to discuss the Ukraine crisis. Guterres, who has positioned himself as a mediator, often asserts that annexing Ukrainian territory has no place in the modern world. Ukraine's foreign ministry criticized Guterres' decision to attend, calling it a mistake that only harms the UN's reputation. The bilateral meeting between Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, their first in 5 years, also drew significant attention. Relations between China and India have long been tense due to their 3,440-kilometer disputed border. The landscape, with rivers, lakes, and snow peaks, often shifts, leading to frequent encounters and occasional clashes between soldiers. In June 2020, the border between Tibet in China and Ladakh in India saw the most severe conflict in decades, resulting in the deaths of at least 20 Indian and 4 Chinese soldiers. Later that year, both countries agreed to partially withdraw troops from disputed areas and to de-escalate, but tensions remained. The two sides clashed again in 2021 in northern Sikkim and in 2022 in the Tawang region. This military standoff has impacted trade relations between the two countries. India has increased scrutiny of Chinese investments, banned popular Chinese apps like TikTok, and suspended direct flights to China. Rising tensions have also heightened India's concerns about regional security, pushing it closer to the U.S. through the Quad, a regional security group. In September 2021, U.S. President Joe Biden held the first Quad meeting with leaders from Australia, India, and Japan. This meeting was a key part of the U.S. strategy in the Indo-Pacific. A significant discussion topic was how to best prevent China from taking control of Taiwan. On May 20, 2023, leaders from the Quad nations, Australia, Japan, India, and the United States met in Hiroshima, Japan, with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese hosting. The 4 countries jointly reaffirmed their commitment to a free, open, inclusive, and resilient Pacific region, and emphasized the importance of working closely with regional partners. They also underscored the need for significant action on climate change and clean, reliable, and secure energy. The Quad leaders expressed their strong dedication to maintaining peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, and voiced opposition to any destabilizing or unilateral actions that attempt to alter the status quo by force or coercion, particularly concerning the rules-based order in the East and South China Seas. The diplomatic and military arrangements of the Quad are widely perceived as a response to China's growing economic and military power, which has led the Chinese government to issue formal diplomatic protests to the Quad members. Observers note that as both a Quad member and a founding member of BRICS, India seems to be maintaining a balancing act in its relations with China. China is evidently wary of further straining relations with India, as BRICS has struggled to project a unified stance. Relations between India and China showed signs of improvement, with India announcing a new agreement with China on patrol agreements in the disputed border areas, which China confirmed. Though improved India-China relations are mutually beneficial, they won't reshape BRICS dynamics. The two countries' geopolitical rivalry will persist, with India opposing any shift from U.S. influence to Chinese dominance or an anti-Western BRICS agenda. Reports suggest that easing tensions with India could drive a wedge between New Delhi and Washington, providing temporary relief for Beijing as it grapples with an economy weakened by a real estate crisis. For India, a stable and lasting border agreement would be a welcome respite for Prime Minister Modi's government. Analysts believe that while improved India-China relations might make BRICS a more cohesive group, any agreement on border patrols may still be fragile due to unresolved details about patrol procedures in disputed areas. India's foreign policy is shaped by a mix of alliances that don't always align. It is the only country in both the Quad, a defense group with the US, Japan, and Australia, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is led by China and Russia, and also includes India's rival, Pakistan. In earlier years, India showed considerable enthusiasm for BRICS, promoting cooperation mechanisms within the group. However, since Modi took office, India has emphasized shared values and interests with the West, downplaying its commonalities with BRICS members, especially amid growing border tensions with China. India has also resisted BRICS expansion, concerned that it would further strengthen China's influence within the group and potentially introduce its adversary, Pakistan, as a member. India advocates for keeping BRICS as a club for major developing countries rather than expanding it indiscriminately. Both China and the United States are actively courting India, though India clearly leans towards alignment with the US and the EU. Recently, India signed a $3.5 billion deal to purchase American Predator drones. Shortly after Prime Minister Modi returned to New Delhi from the BRICS Summit, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz visited India for talks, where the two leaders discussed expediting a free trade agreement between the EU and India. German Economy Minister Robert Habeck commented that India is one of the most vibrant regions globally, with a rapidly growing middle class and significant trade routes and ports. For Germany, reducing dependence on China's economy makes India an essential partner. At the BRICS Summit, Xi Jinping was particularly pleased with the presence of Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Xi told Pezeshkian that Iran is a good friend and partner of China, emphasizing that the strategic significance of China-Iran relations has grown as the world undergoes profound changes. Xi Jinping expressed support for Iran in safeguarding its sovereignty, security, and national dignity. He emphasized China's commitment to help Iran pursue economic and social development and to foster friendly relations with neighboring countries. Xi affirmed that China is ready to stand by Iran in upholding the principle of non-interference in internal affairs and protecting the legitimate interests of both nations. Iran has been viewed as a key supporter of the Hamas attack on October 7th last year, which resulted in the deaths of approximately 1,200 people, including Israelis and over 70 foreign nationals. Iran has also spent years building Hezbollah's arsenal and providing military support, considering it an essential part of its frontline defense. However, starting this summer, Israel has launched multiple attacks against Iran and its allies, with a focus on Hezbollah, Iran's most significant ally in Lebanon. Israel's actions included the destruction of Hezbollah's communication equipment, incursions into southern Lebanon, and the assassination of Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, a prominent figure of resistance against Israel. As tensions in the Middle East surged again, Iran, seeking to maintain its leadership role among anti-Israel and anti-Western forces in the region, launched a large-scale ballistic missile attack on Israel on October 1st. This attack drew widespread condemnation from the West, with the U.S. imposing additional sanctions on Iran and providing Israel with a THAAD missile defense system in mid-October. Facing the wave of sanctions from the U.S. and Western countries, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian received special attention at the BRICS Summit. Iran has emerged as one of Xi's staunchest supporters within the BRICS framework.